Well, good afternoon, listeners. You're listening to Lament of Hope podcast, and I am your host, Danielle Richardson. But today, I'm actually not your host because my friend sitting next to me here, Anna, we've been friends for a couple years now. I think we got really close, what, year and a half ago?
Mhm.
Yeah. And she said she really wanted to interview me. Now, I was a little bit reticent about this because, as you guys know, I like to interview other people, but she said that listeners would like to listen to this. So if you did like it, you better comment and help me feel a little less awkward about the fact that this is about me. But just so you know, the girl next to me is Anna. We've been friends for a couple years. She doesn't live far from me. And the cat over here is chewing the shoe. So if you hear chewing sounds, that's the cat. So anyway, we are here and Anna's going to take it away for us. Anna?
All right. Hi, guys. So I've clearly, obviously, never been here before. So this is a new thing for me. And I think everyone here is going to see. Obviously, we have a different setup and all the things, but it's going to be fun and we're going to have a good time. So, um, welcome to being the interviewee and not the interviewer. Take a
Yeah.
deep breath. It's going to be fine. Okay, so let's start easy because you said you like to field people easy questions first. So I'm going to try and do that also. So let's just talk about when you started the podcast. Let's talk about what was the idea? I'm interested to know what was when you envision having the podcast. What was like the core, like this is what I want it to be about.
So, and for those listening, I'm sorry if you hear some mic transitions. Unfortunately, we only have one mic, so there might be some glitching on that end. But um, that's a good question. Honestly, I started the website for the podcast a while ago. Yeah, there's the cat in the background. That's Nightly getting a cameo appearance. I started the podcast uh a couple years ago, actually as just like a blog to talk about different stuff I was going through at the time. I was actually going through a pretty rough breakup at the time, so I was using the blog to like write poems and stories and things like that. And then after a couple years, I graduated from college and I couldn't find a journalism major. Like I had a journalism major, but I couldn't find a job that was very people oriented. It was very much like do news or do nothing. And so I really wanted to um I really wanted to be able to connect with people and I really wanted to be able to tell people's stories. And so I ended up finding this one of my favorite singers from when I was young, Lisa Kelly. She was with Celtic Women for like, I don't know, 10, 15 years. And I said, not just for fun, I'm gonna send her an email and see if she replies and see if she does like an interview.
Mhm.
And she replies, yeah, absolutely. And I was like, this can't be possible because I was a nobody. And then she comes on, and it ended up being so fun. And then I didn't have a microphone, I didn't have anything. It was just Zoom. So if you guys look it up on the website, it's like on there at the very bottom. It's the very first post after the stories that come before it. But I was completely new at it but I had so much fun and I loved it and I said, "Well, what if I just keep going with this and what if I just keep asking people I'm interested in to do interviews?" And I was so surprised because I kept sending out invitations. I did hours of work and just trying to see if anyone would be interested in it and a lot of people were. And now there's 198 episodes that have been published, but I've done over 200 that are, still waiting in the queue to get out there. And now it's like being able to interview like Viggo Mortensen from Lord of the Rings and like just some really fun people. My heart behind it was I really wanted to give it to people to have a safe space to share who they are and what they like and what they believe because I do think as a society we don't take enough time to get to know people on a deeper level. And I didn't want it to be about me. I wanted it to be about the person. And most podcasts are about the podcaster, which isn't bad, right? I mean, it's cool to have like a really cool personality and a great voice.
Mhm.
But for me, it was like, okay, well, I really like stories. I like people. So I wanted to give them that
Mhm.
avenue and do something different.
Okay. I love that. So, and I know this about you that you're a people-oriented person. So I actually kind of have two questions going off of that. So let's just go one at a time. But this one is probably pretty easy. But so you mentioned before you were doing more like stories, poems, those kind of things. So tell me a little bit about what's different in your approach to writing a piece versus interviewing a person, because those are two very different, like, creative processes. And do you have a preference? I feel like I already know the answer to this one.
Um, when I'm going through a hard time, I love journaling. So honestly, that is actually easier when I'm sad, I think, than talking to a person.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, you can be way more vulnerable when you're writing because no one's gonna see it. Or if anyone's gonna see it, it's gonna be a very small amount of people. And since now the website is a podcast,
Mhm.
I don't do much writing anymore. Once in a while I will, but it's mostly the interviews now. Um, but I think in general, I do like talking to people. Um, but I think it depends on, it's two different things. It's interesting. I think when I'm really sad, I gravitate toward writing, and then when I'm not as sad or more just in the normal zone or wanting to talk to people, um, I like talking to people. But it is harder. I guess when I am sad, yeah, I like writing more than talking to people.
Yeah.
Um, But now it's not really an option because the podcast has to be published. So whether I'm sad or not, but on my own personal time, I think writing when I'm sad, but otherwise I really do enjoy talking to people. And I'm trying to talk to people more when I am sad, but I find that harder because it's harder to feel like you're in a safe space. Because I know if I'm giving a safe space to people, it'll be a safe space. But I don't
Mhm.
know the same if I say it to somebody,
Sure.
if they're gonna be like, shut up, or,
Right.
you know.
Well, and that's actually a really interesting point because I think a lot of people don't really consider how does the interviewer feel, right? It's kind of like, oh, I'm the point of interest. I'm the subject of interest. So it's kind of the interviewer's job to make me feel whatever. Like, let's have a space where our conversation will flow, etc. But I actually never really thought about it. So you just said it just now. But that person that you're interviewing also has an impact on how you feel. I am curious too. So this was the other question that I had. So you've interviewed like many celebrities and people of, some fame or renown, and I'm thinking this is something I consider a lot is I feel like I call it like the dehumanization of like celebrity people, right? And I'm curious what your thoughts are, having encountered many people especially in a context in which like they aren't typically. Like, the kind of interviews you have are a little more informal, they're a little bit more real, talking about more real things. And so that gives them an opportunity to be more real, right? And I'm wondering, like, if when you encounter these people, are you like, oh my goodness, like the stardom, like they're like, that kind of like when it feels like a celebrity is kind of like removed from the rest of humanity. Do you kind of get what I'm asking you?
Yeah, no, I do. I
Not a
mean,
concise question, but hopefully that
no,
made sense.
no, I do. I totally. I mean, there are times when I'm waiting on the screen for the person's name to come up and it comes up that they're waiting
Hmm.
on the Zoom. And I've had so many, well, my, my husband's not really going to like this that much, but I've had some very good-looking guys from the uh, musician or acting world that I've been able to interview. And when I saw their name come up, my heart started racing a little bit, and I was starting to get like nervous. Um, because like, I've always I've wanted to have these moments with them or meet them, and I never fought. Like if I thought if ever I was going to meet him, it was going to be like an autograph thing or something.
Mhm.
But it is interesting though because by the end of the interview, it's not that they've it's not that they've become less good looking or anything like that, but it's more like I've heard about their life or I've heard about their um struggles they've gone through or I've heard about what they believe. And I realize that they're just doing life like me and they just happen to have a TV in front of them all the time or a camera or whatever. And it's not, I don't want to say there's nothing special about them, but they're humanized in the sense of like, oh, they just live life like me. Like they have coffee, they have hard times. Some of them are saying, I'm doing acting because I have to make money and it's not all that. And then other people, it's like I'm interviewing them and they're wearing a ball cap, and it's like, no, I've only ever known you wearing this type of clothes. You can't be wearing a ball cap. You're breaking the image. But like, I think, and I love it because it's just, yeah, it's just a real conversation with them and you get to know them. But at first, I do have the stardom thing going. I think it's becoming a little less now because of the fact that I'm, I guess, seeing them for who they are is made me see them more as a person, and so the stardust around them kind of goes away.
Mhm.
Um, but like I don't think there's anyone I've interviewed that I wouldn't want to see again like that. It wasn't like, oh, I don't want to talk to you anymore, but it was more of just they weren't so out of reach and so romantic as I thought,
Mhm.
because when you get to know people and what they're going through and stuff like that, then it is much more just normal.
Sure. Yeah, I love that. And I think that's something that is super heartwarming about your personality is that you want to get to the heart of who people are and you want to give them a space where they're listened to and they can just be themselves. And it's not about, okay, how much can I get this person to agree with me? Or how much can I get this person to, tell me some kind of like crazy story? But it's just like, tell me your life experience. Like, let me hear your story. And I think that is really cool. So, kind of going off on a little bit of a tangent in a little bit of another direction, since we're talking about celebrities, um, some of your audience may or may not know that you've been to Africa before, and you went to Ghana, right? Twice, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And so anyone who's been to Africa as an American, there can be a bit of culture shock, that can be or a little or a lot, depending on where you go. And it's very different, right? So I think it would be very interesting if you would talk a little bit about you know, the contrast of people there and people here in regards of like happiness. I think like you've talked to so many people who have these careers or all this money or fame or what have you. And then you go to this country where, you know, the celebrity thing isn't so much of a big deal. So you kind of wanna, I don't know. Do you have thoughts on that? Have you ever considered, yeah, what is the joy of the people there and the joy of people here?
Yeah, I mean that's a good question. I mean, to give context too, Anna also went overseas for a time this past summer, and so um, going to another country is very different. Um, it's true, yeah. I mean, in Ghana, like they don't know, at least when I was there 2 winters ago now. I mean, they don't talk about celebrities or anything like that. I mean, there's nothing like that there. They also podcasts and stuff. That's not really uh, talked about either. I think the hardest thing for me, I don't know, being in Ghana, I think the hardest thing for me was talking to the women there because um the women there are so beautiful, first of all, just like in appearance. I think they're beautiful. in skin tone and just in they're so warm and friendly and their personalities. Um, but interestingly, like they definitely, I would say, yes, the joy there is definitely very authentic and based on something, they don't have a lot of stuff. So yeah, I think that in that way they're very hospitable. They don't think about, um, how inconvenient will this be for me? No. But I think what was hard for um me when I was in Ghana was the fact that the women there, um, unlike the women in America, like they don't see much of a future for themselves outside of what has always been done. Um, and I think a lot of them experience abuse, but they don't know it's abuse. And so when you talk to them, it kind of like here, it's a huge thing, mental health, abuse, all of that. We talk about it a ton. There's sexual abuse, emotional abuse, all this stuff. In Ghana, they don't know what you're talking about. And so when you're explaining it to them, like they might go, "Oh," um, but like they don't do anything about that, you know? They don't have any sort of outlet for that. I think that was the hardest for me going there because when I was talking to the women there, they were so surprised by how outgoing I was and that I could like make jokes and that my husband and I would do things together and that I would even like interrupt him at times. Didn't like and like in Ghana when we were there at a conference, um they announced the man by saying Mr. John Richardson, and then they would say Mrs. Richardson Danielle. The woman's her last name goes first, and I would make fun of that, and I don't know if I should have done this honestly, but I would say my name's Mrs. Danielle Richardson. Danielle is my name. But it was things like that where I think everyone there, even the men, I mean, they're very authentic, but it's just a very um they don't understand the teamwork thing in marriage. So it's very much like the man dominates and the woman follows. And I'm not saying this in every home there's this, abusive relationship, but I think it was sad to me that the women there didn't have a knowledge of who they were in Christ and like all the things they could do. Like they didn't just have to have these specific things and that was it. That's all life had for them. There was so much more. And whenever you would talk to the ladies, like they would laugh and they would just have such sweet personalities. And I was like, but you wouldn't really see that if you wouldn't spend time with just them. Because when it's the men and the women, just in Ghanaian culture, the women are serving the food and the men are talking and discussing. And the only real reason why I got to be a whiff all where all the men were was because I was a guest from America.
Right.
So um but they definitely, I mean, life for them is so much more simple. Like there's so many things here that contribute, I think, to mental health struggles. But in Ghana, there's definitely a need for counseling and for women especially. I think there's a need for um a broader perspective of what it means to be a woman. But I don't think their lifestyle is lesser than just because they don't have all the stuff we've got. I mean, when I was there, like life was much more easy than here. Like I didn't have to worry about schedules. I didn't have to worry about much beyond like when was I gonna eat lunch? Where was I gonna get lunch? Who was I gonna help make the lunch or the dinner or whatever. Like I didn't have like there's no I didn't have all the really electronics. I wasn't checking my email because I didn't have Wi-Fi everywhere. You can only have Wi-Fi in very specific places. And I found that I think, I mean, I definitely had my moments like I got sick and everything because I ate beans that were probably soaked in some water that a cow had drinking from or something. But um I actually feel like I was pretty calm. like
Mm-hmm.
on the day to day.
Really? Yeah.
Because there wasn't a lot of stress.
Sure.
There wasn't anything going, like, there's no highways, like, there's just, we were in northern Ghana and it was sand, and you would see dogs walking around, and we saw a donkey give birth to a foal. And like you heard him giving birthing sounds outside while we were eating dinner, and everyone rushed out, and there this foal had just popped out. But like that was just life there. And
Yeah.
like you didn't even know who the foal belonged to, because eventually the donkey will just go back to wherever he belongs. But like he just goes where he wants.
Sure. Yeah.
Like it was just so chill. Like there
Uh-huh.
was just no
Yeah. It's not like
yeah, like
crash on
yeah,
267. Everyone's
you
panicking.
also hear, and you probably know this, I mean, we have work. We have so much stuff we got to do. They're like they have basic stuff they got to do.
Right.
And like it doesn't mean they're not busy, especially the people in ministry there are super busy, but
Mm-hmm.
life is, you take time,
Mm-hmm.
you live it.
Just takes longer.
Yeah,
So
there's
just
not, you
take your
gotta don't
time
have to
with it.
do stuff. Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I like that. That's definitely something I noticed too. It's just the pace
Yeah.
is totally different. And I went to Rwanda, so very different country, but still similar thing where, I personally think it, like you said about electronics, I think that has a lot to do with it. Not to hate on electronics because communication is really helpful and all the disclaimers, but if that's all
It's
like,
stressful.
yeah, you're constantly kind of tethered to something that is um, either you're going to have more commitments or you're going to need to communicate with someone at a certain time or yeah, but just the timeline is kind of always pushing you forward. So I definitely felt that too. Although I did have Wi-Fi where I think most of the time. So our experience was definitely different because I was in a city.
Okay.
Yeah. So we only went out
I
of the
was in a
city.
city in Africa.
Yeah.
They have it so much better. 'Cause obviously the cities in Africa are just so, you know, they're just at a, like they're like New York City, right? They had Broadway and everything there.
I don't know if they had Broadway because I don't know about that. But it wasn't like no we weren't like living in tents necessarily like there was like buildings and stuff.
Oh yeah, no, I wasn't living in a tent. I did have to go to the bathroom outside, and I'm not kidding. I had to go so bad because of the beans. This is a very long story about the beans, but all that to say is that I did have to go to the bathroom outside of the conference, and I had to find a little area, and there were all these animals, and they encircled me like a nativity scene. And I just let it all out. And like the animals were staring at me as I was going, and the missionary woman who was with us was so kind. She had brought toilet paper with her because in Ghana, if you're American and you live in Ghana, you bring toilet paper in your car because wherever you go, you just have to figure it out. And she gave me the toilet paper. I used the whole roll. It was really not a good time. But afterwards, I sat up and turned around, and there was this huge wad of all my stuff, and then on top of it was all of the paper towel, and like the animals were like starting to come over and were like, it was deep.
Yeah.
That was really an experience. That was an experience. And then I washed my hands out of a spigot that the cow was also drinking from, so I pushed the cow aside and ate and washed my hands in the spigot and the cat.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was deep.
You're just like, hey,
I was like,
get out of the way. I have stuff to do. I love it. So you talked a little bit about the women in Ghana, and I'm curious, do you feel that you're more of like, when you think of like what it means to be a woman, do you think more of like a traditional sense, or are you more of like, let's break down walls, let's like, let's, move into a new era and like, I don't know. Do you kind of get what I mean? There's definitely, I think, in our culture, you know, America in 2025, like women are supposed to be able to do anything and we can build our career and we can be the president and we can, do this, that, and the other. And then, the flip side is, you know, there are a lot of women who want to be a stay-at-home mom and they don't want a career and they want to, kind of like have their bubble and stay in it. But I definitely feel that those are two extremes. So, you know, where do you fall on that kind of spectrum? Um, yeah.
I mean, I think we just have too many stereotypes. That's my thing. I mean, like, I don't have a problem if a woman becomes president. I don't have a problem if a woman becomes who doesn't have kids. I don't have a problem with um one thing I've recently been wrestling with just because I did an interview lately with a woman who actually decided to be a single mother on her own because
Mm.
she reached her time clock and was like, I want kids. And so I'm going to do a sperm donation and I'm
Mhm.
gonna have a kid. And I've been thinking about that ever since, but and I was like, that's such an interesting thing because I've never met anyone who would choose that.
Mhm.
Single motherhood is usually not chosen, it happens to you.
Sure.
Um, but I think what's hard for me is the stereotypes. Especially like one thing that's hard for me, and I've talked about before in the podcast, is like I have a lot of I had a lot of family issues. And so having a kid is not as quickly as exciting as it would be maybe for a typical Christian woman, who's had hopefully a relatively calm upbringing, right?
Mhm. Sure.
But I think but then what happens is it's like, okay, well, now it's almost like this expectation. Well, you've been married so long, so now you have kids, and then you do the
Mhm.
next thing. Well, what if I either can't, or what if I'm not sure? Is that like wrong? Like, does that mean I'm becoming less of a woman because I'm not doing that? I think those are, I don't, I think it's the stereotypes that are very difficult. I don't think that I definitely, obviously, and then people listen to podcasts know this, I'm a Christian, so I do believe that there is, in marriage, that a woman there's this love relationship between a husband and wife and they serve one another. There's a selflessness there, but I don't think a woman has to be a certain thing. And I think social media, it's interesting because I've always found like social media is like be your authentic self, be whoever you want. And then every time you scroll through social media, all you see are these beautiful people doing amazing, beautiful things. And you're like, well, what am I supposed to do? I don't look like this. I don't have this kind of money. I don't make these kind of trips. And it's like, you're like, okay, so my authentic self is to be these type of people. And there's a stereotype again. What is a woman
Mhm.
supposed to look like? You know? It's like, well, what if a woman looks kind of average? Which is like most of us. Like, I'm not trying to be mean, but like, there's always something, I have, you either have too big a nose, or when you laugh really loud and you don't just go, huh, or you have really small breasts, and some women have really big ones, and they're just like, but then like you go on Instagram and everything's proportional and perfect, or like super skinny, and like they just have beautiful hair or beautiful faces, and you're just like, yeah, no, not me. And like I put makeup on maybe once a week because I hate it. And it takes 10 minutes to do it for me, which is really not that long, but I don't like doing it. I don't
Yeah.
like doing the 10 minutes.
Sure.
So I don't like to do the 10 minutes. As people listening can tell, because look at my face, there is no makeup on it. Yep. There's a pimple here. There's another one.
The tour.
Oh, it's my ear. Yeah. So it's just things like that where I don't think we should have stereotypes for what a woman should be, and I think that would make people happier. But we live in a fallen world too, though, so that's not going to go away. So you have to know who you are. I mean, and I believe you have to know who you are in Christ, but outside of that, like you need to be okay with what you are as a woman. If you don't look like a certain person, that's fine. If you like boy stuff, you can still be a woman. If you're really outdoorsy and like sports, that shouldn't make you think, "Oh, I can't be a woman now," because that's not woman territory.
Mm.
God has given us all things to enjoy.
Sure.
So if you like softball, whatever, do it. If you're a woman,
Hmm.
that's fine. If you don't like makeup, you don't like painting, whatever. Like, why does that matter? But it
Mm.
seems like it matters so much, and it
Hmm.
has to be that way. Like, I like wearing overalls, and I find them to be some of the most comfortable outfits.
Yeah.
Well, okay, maybe it's not a woman's style. I don't know, but I don't care. And I'm still a woman. I don't care. I just
Hmm.
like overalls. So I wish we saw it that way. I think that would give people a lot more comfort if we just were like, yeah, you wanna do that? Like that's fine. You don't have to be a boy or a girl to do that activity or look that way, you know?
Hmm.
I don't.
Yeah, no, that's good. I think it's really an identity thing, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like, I have to figure out who I am. And if I'm, showing people this is who I am, then I need to like make a clear, put myself in a box so people know like this is who I am. I'm this type of
Yeah,
woman,
exactly. Yeah,
right? Like
exactly.
I'm an athletic woman, or I'm a girl boss woman, or I'm a, what is the trad wife woman, right? So, but like exactly what you're saying, like we're more complex than that. We're more layered than that. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's also sometimes more simple than that, where it's just like maybe that I am this way for a season and
Yeah.
maybe another season I'm not.
Yeah, exactly.
100%. I agree. I think our culture is very much, I think we, like our generation, and maybe you have thoughts on this, is one of the most like simultaneously trying to figure out who we are, but at the same time just having no idea who we are.
Yeah.
Whereas constantly like I gotta figure out like, is this the job for me? Is this the person for me? I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know. I'm changing. I don't know. Like, what do I believe? All these things. And I don't think it used to be like that. I think like a lot of our grandparents were just like, well, we worked on the farm because like that's where we were raised, or I was an apprentice to my dad who was a plumber because like that's what he did. So that's what I did. Not to say that we have to like necessarily do whatever our parents did, but just there wasn't so much like overthinking all the time.
Yeah. And but the interesting thing though too is if you talk to the older generation, they have so much wisdom, but they also have so much rigidity
Hmm.
too. You know, because like I've just come across like there are some older women in my life who I love so deeply, but they have very rigid ideas about romantic relationships or
Hmm.
dating or um what a woman and a man should be
Hmm.
in the sense of stuff. So what sometimes because I would say that too. I'm like, oh, maybe it was better in the older days. And I definitely think they had less options, and so in
Hmm.
some ways it made it easier. But also I think it did what it, because then it's interesting because we're coming into this generation now where we're like, did our parents do everything right? And we're starting
Hmm.
to think, okay,
Sure.
was this the way that Jesus actually said this, or was this what the Bible actually said? But we were raised thinking it was, and then realizing that they were seeing it through a very rigid lens because
Hmm.
that's how they were taught before.
Sure.
So, but I definitely agree with you. There were less options, and now there's so many options that it's overwhelming. So now there's no direction.
Mm.
But I definitely think with the older generation, what's harder is trying to get them to see, okay, well, what about this? Or like, can you see a little bit beyond the stereotype and see beyond that and see the person? Can we go a little deeper? Can we try to understand this a little bit more? And I think that's
Hmm.
harder for them
Sure.
because I think they're I think they're afraid to because they're like, no, I've always fought this way. Why should I change it?
Hmm.
But I do think now that like I'm gonna give an example. This may be weird, but like I know, and I don't think it's wrong that a man should be the first one to ask a woman out. I think that's good, and that shows a responsibility I do. But I also like if a woman were to ask a man out,
Hmm.
I'm not gonna tell her you shouldn't have done that. That's
Hmm.
wrong.
Hmm. Right.
I mean, I don't know their story. Like,
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, would I prefer? Yeah, I probably would prefer, that a guy would ask me, but at the same time, like I have asked guys, like, do you like me? Like just directly because I didn't want to wait. and like they could tell me no or yes.
Hmm.
But like I didn't think that was wrong. Like I think that helped me a lot figure it out. Because then when they said no, I was like, great, I can move on now.
Right.
I don't have to pretend
Sure.
to set up these like fake stuff that's like actually not going to get anywhere, you know?
The whole
But
like
things like that. But then if I
nice
say that,
thing.
it's like, no, with the older generation, it's like, no, it has to be the man who does it.
Hmm.
Or, it's like just things like that, or like online dating, or things like medicine for taking medicine for anything, or taking medicine for mental health,
Hmm.
or
Hmm.
making mental health jokes,
Sure.
which now that we're in the mental health crisis, they're not that funny anymore.
Right.
Things like that. Where they're like, oh, that person's like as crazy as and you're like, actually, that's, they're like, they're mental. You're like, I'm mental.
Yeah.
Like I'm mental.
We
Like
probably
things
all have
like
a
that.
diagnosis at
Yeah.
this point, right?
Yeah. But
Yeah.
I agree with you that there were less choices
Yeah.
and that did make life easier to
Sure.
pick a direction to go in.
Hmm. So speaking to like you mentioned like the rigidity of like a worldview or a kind of a thought process. So I'm curious. I always start this is how I start. I'm curious.
Thanks for
Tell
having a class, by the way, called I'm
I'm
Curious.
curious. I'm just curious. Um, what would you what let me start over. Can you think of a time, whether it was in an interview or else, where you had a very strong opinion about something and somebody changed your mind on it? Has that ever happened like in an interview or talking to someone? Maybe it doesn't even have to be like a huge worldview thing. And if there isn't one, that's okay.
No, that's a
Actually,
really
if you say you've never changed your mind, I'm gonna be really?
No, that's a
Never?
really good question. Um, okay. I think as a Christian, I grew up really thinking of someone who's not a Christian is like a mission or a um opposing side.
Hmm. Okay.
And the more I suffered growing up, just going through life, and the more I interacted with individuals who didn't believe what I believed, but were still so kind to me and so present, and sometimes even more so than believers, I realized that that mentality was not only not biblical, but it just wasn't actually true. Because the only difference between me and the person that doesn't believe in Jesus is that I believe that what Christ said, which is that I believe the truth, and the truth has set me free. But I am still human and created in the image of God, just like the person next to me who may not believe that. And I like I think my whole mentality on that has changed. It is so quick to judge someone and go, well, they just don't believe in Jesus. They don't understand. It's like, no, they're living life, they're hurting, and they're trying to find meaning. They're trying to they're just trying to do the right thing. They're trying to figure out what the next step is in their life. And I've seen it much more as how can I come alongside this person and I
Hmm.
can share the gospel with them. I can share what I believe with them, but I want to know them.
Hmm.
And Christ wanted to know people in scripture. He was always being intimate with the people he was talking to. He wasn't just going and firing off about, well, this is what is right and true and all this. Yes, he did tell them what was true, but he wanted to know their stories and he always got down to their level to talk with them. And there wasn't this hierarchy in his mind. And I mean, obviously he's God, so there was a difference, but he didn't make it seem so. And I'm a sinner. There's really no difference. The only difference between me and someone who doesn't believe in Christ is that I believe I found the truth and that the truth has set me free and that I'm living life to honor God, not myself. But we're both human. We both create in the image of God. We're both talented. We both are full of creative things and we're both full of sorrows. We're both full of emotions. And so the barrier that I had growing up, thinking there was this huge difference, and also this pride that I had in a sense, the more people I have talked to, and I think the big person that changes for me, one woman I talked to was a political prisoner, Laura Whitehorn,
Okay.
and she had bombed the US Senate building during the Vietnam War in protest of war. And, you know, I don't agree with her, what she did. But what her point was after we talked about everything was she was like, I just want a better world. I just want peace. And I didn't know how else to tell other people we needed peace then to do that, right? I don't agree with what she did, but I can understand why she did it. But I think a lot of Christians would go, well, I'm not going to talk to you because you're just violent, or you just don't get it, or what you did is wrong. Okay, but what have I done that's wrong? Does
Mm-hmm.
that mean you should stop talking to me? Should we not have these conversations? I have learned so much from people who don't believe in Jesus because sometimes they don't have this um they don't have this guard up all the time sometimes. And I think Christians can quickly have one with someone who doesn't believe in what they believe. Um, but at the end of the day, like we need to talk, we need to be authentic, we need to share with each other. And I think that's really important. It doesn't mean that I can't say what I believe, and I have done it before where I'm like, I'm a Christian, I don't believe this is right. But that doesn't make the person I'm talking to untouchable.
Right.
I think that thinks that that's the important thing. And I think that's what's hard for me. And that's what the podcast has changed my whole view on is I want to talk to you. I want to know you. I don't just because I'm a Christian, you're not, does not mean we cannot have a good conversation and we cannot experience humanity together and talk about it and talk about the hard things in life because we both cried, we've both laughed, we can connect. And I think that's really important. And I do think Christians are afraid to do that. But I don't think we should be. And I think Christ shows us more of himself in those interactions than we think.
Yeah. I
That was long.
No, that's really good. I think that is that's like what I was, I honestly had no idea where you're going to take that, but I think that's really good because it also kind of just like ties everything together really nicely of like, this is that's one of the big reasons why you have the podcast, but this is also just how you live your life, right? Where you're going and you're interacting with people and you're curious about them and you're interested in being authentic to them also, and not putting up a wall or putting up your guard just because maybe you have some kind of difference with them in belief or life experience, right? Like those things aren't enough. Those things aren't important enough to not have a relationship with someone or not have a connection or at least a conversation. And each person is valuable. And I think that is a really beautiful way to like live your life where you're seeking out and like pointing out the value in each person. Like and that's like in your mind too, where you're approaching someone with that perspective. Because I think it's super, like you said, it's like super easy to go up to someone and be like, oh, well, we disagree. So, you know, and then in that dismissal of that person because of something you don't agree on, there is, I think, maybe not always, but there can really be a like a raising up of oneself and a lowering of that person in your mind. And I don't think like that's not Christ-like. That's not exactly what you were saying. Like that's not how Christ interacted with people, even though it was true that like had like he's God, right?
Yeah.
So he is elevated.
Yeah. He made himself a servant.
Exactly. He came and like met people exactly where they were. And I think that's really beautiful. So I think that is a really beautiful way to live your life and to run a podcast. And it's cool to see it play out in real life.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this has been fun and weird.
That's a new one.
Um, but yeah, no, thank you, Anna, and thank you guys for listening. And if you have questions about me that are not super out of like line, there are some things I will not talk about, like, bathroom routine or things like that. I'm not going to talk to you about that.
We talked a little bit about that
That's
today.
true, but that was in Ghana, and that was like a random funny coincidence.
Special story, special
Yeah,
story.
special story, right. So, but I'm so grateful. I loved having Anna with me. And if you want Anna to start a podcast, which I've been telling her she should, then comment. And I'll send her pictures of all the comments, and maybe that'll make her change her mind.
Yeah. Okay, well, at least I have a name now. Just curious.
All right, guys. Thank you. Bye.